Did you know that one of the most enigmatic civilizations in the Bible was born from a surprising and somewhat controversial story? Today, we will dive into the history of the Moabites, a people whose peculiar origin is intimately connected to Israel. What you discover about them might completely change your perspective on some of the most well-known biblical narratives. Have you ever wondered what role the Moabites played in sacred stories, or why their presence is key to understanding the relationship between biblical peoples? If so, this video is for you. The Moabites were not just Israel's neighbors, they also became central characters in stories filled with conflicts, treacherous alliances, and prophecies that shaped the course of history. Understanding their relationship with Israel and their role in the scriptures takes us deeper into lessons that still hold relevance today. What secrets do their origins hide? And how does their story offer us a new perspective on the biblical texts? So, don't go away, because what you learn today might change the way you see the scriptures. Now, a question for you. If you already knew about the Moabites, which story impacted you the most? If you're ready to delve into this mysterious tale, write "I love Bible stories" in the comments. Let's begin this exciting journey together. The origin of the Moabites. To understand who the Moabites were, we must go back to a fascinating and somewhat disturbing account in the book of Genesis. After the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, Lot, Abraham's nephew, took refuge in a cave with his two daughters. This event is narrated in Genesis chapter 19, verses 30 to 38, and it constitutes the origin of the Moabites and the Ammonites. After fleeing the destruction of the cities, Lot and his daughters settled in a cave in the mountains, fearing that no one else was left on earth with whom they could live. Lot's daughters, concerned about the continuity of their lineage and the lack of men around them, devised a desperate plan. They decided to intoxicate their father to have children with him, ensuring the survival of their family. The elder daughter executed the plan first, getting Lot drunk and lying with him while he was unconscious. The next day, the younger sister did the same. From these unions, two sons were born, Moab and Ben-Ammi. Moab became the progenitor of the Moabites, while Ben-Ammi was the ancestor of the Ammonites. Although related, these two peoples had very different and complex histories in their relations with Israel. This unusual and controversial origin of the Moabites is only the beginning of a series of events that would define their history. The story of Lot and his daughters shows a moment of desperation and drastic decisions, reflecting human complexities that the Bible does not shy away from portraying. Moreover, it introduces us to a people who would play a significant role in the biblical narrative. The founding of the Moabites through Moab and his brother Ben-Ammi establishes an important context for understanding the future interactions between Israel and its neighboring peoples. Through these accounts, we can see how even in desperate situations and questionable decisions, God can weave his broader purpose and plan. Stay with us to discover more about the history of the Moabites and their impact on the Bible. The Moabites in biblical history. The Moabites, descendants of Moab, appear on numerous occasions throughout the Old Testament, always with a significant presence that helps us understand the complex relationship between them and Israel. From the moment of their origin, as we saw in the account of Lot and his daughters in Genesis chapter 19, verses 30 to 38, the Moabites are an integral part of the biblical landscape, involved in conflicts, alliances, and key events that shaped the history of Israel. One of the first important mentions of the Moabites is found in the book of Numbers during the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt. The Moabites felt threatened by the growing nation of Israel. Balak, the king of Moab, sought the help of the prophet Balaam to curse the Israelites and thus weaken them. However, God intervened, and instead of cursing them, Balaam ended up blessing Israel. Numbers chapter 22, verse 24. This event highlights the initial tension between the Moabites and Israel and shows how God protected his people. The Moabites were also involved in various conflicts with Israel during the time of the Judges. In Judges chapter 3, verses 12 to 30, Eglon, king of Moab, oppressed Israel for 18 years. However, Israel was freed thanks to Judge Ehud, who cunningly assassinated Eglon and led Israel to victory over Moab. This event highlights not only armed conflict, but also the tactics and bravery of Israelite leaders. In the time of King David, the relationship between Moab and Israel took a more complex turn. Before becoming king, David sought refuge for his parents among the Moabites, 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 3 to 4, suggesting a relationship of trust at that time. However, later, David conquered Moab and made them his vassals, 2 Samuel chapter 8, verse 2. This duality in the relationship highlights the fluctuating nature of interactions between these peoples. An interesting aspect is the figure of Ruth, a Moabite who became a direct ancestor of King David and therefore part of Jesus' lineage. Ruth's story is one of redemption and grace, showing that despite conflicts, there were also moments of integration and blessing between Moab and Israel. Israel's relationship with the Moabites is a clear example of the complexities and dynamics in the interactions of peoples in the Bible. Through these stories, we see a mix of conflict, cooperation, and redemption, reflecting how God can work amidst tensions and cultural differences. Stay with us as we continue to uncover more about the Moabites and their impact on the biblical narrative. Culture and religion of the Moabites. The culture and religion of the Moabites were fundamental aspects that defined their identity and interaction with other nations, including Israel. As descendants of Moab, the Moabites developed customs and religious practices that reflected their beliefs and way of life, which often sharply contrasted with those of the Israelites. The Moabites were known for their polytheistic religious practices, worshipping several deities, with the primary one being Chemosh. Chemosh was considered the national god of Moab, and his worship was deeply rooted in Moabite culture. It is believed that Chemosh, similar to other Canaanite deities, was a warrior and fertility god, and that rituals in his honor might have included sacrifices, possibly even human sacrifices, though concrete evidence is limited and comes mainly from biblical and archaeological sources. The worship of Chemosh is mentioned in several parts of the Old Testament, underscoring its importance in the religious life of the Moabites. In Numbers chapter 21, verse 29, there is a reference to the people of Chemosh in a context of defeat and exile, highlighting how the Moabites linked their nation's destiny directly with the favor or wrath of their god. Another significant piece of evidence of the Moabites' religious practices is the Mesha Stele, an important archaeological artifact discovered in 1868. This inscription, made by Mesha, king of Moab, in the 9th century BC, celebrates Moab's liberation from Israel's dominion and dedicates this victory to Chemosh. The stele not only provides historical details about the battles and politics of the time, but also reveals how the Moabites interpreted their victories and defeats in terms of Chemosh's will and power. The religious practices of the Moabites, while similar in some respects to those of their Canaanite neighbors, also set them apart and often put them in conflict with Israel. The Bible recounts several episodes where the Israelites turned toward the worship of Moabite gods, which always resulted in severe divine reprimands and punishments. For instance, in Numbers chapter 25, verses 1 to 3, it is told how the Israelites began participating in the rituals of Baal Peor, which provoked a plague among them as a punishment for their unfaithfulness to Yahweh. The contrast between the worship of Yahweh and the Moabite god Chemosh underscores the theological and cultural differences that often led to tensions and conflicts. However, the story of Ruth, the Moabite, shows that integration and acceptance were also possible suggesting that the relationship between Israel and Moab was complex and multifaceted. The culture and religion of the Moabites offer us a rich and nuanced view of a people who, despite their differences with Israel, played a crucial role in the biblical narrative. By understanding their customs and practices, we can better appreciate the dynamics of the region and the interactions that shaped ancient history. Key events involving the Moabites. The Moabites played a significant role in various biblical events, highlighting the tensions and conflicts with Israel. Two key episodes are the story of Balak and Balaam and the account of King Eglon and Judge Ehud. In Numbers chapter 22, verse 24, we find the story of Balak and Balaam. During the Exodus, the Israelites approached the land of Moab, alarming King Balak. Fearing the large number of Israelites, Balak decided to hire Balaam, a prophet known for his effective curses and blessings, to curse Israel. Balaam consulted God, who forbade him from cursing Israel as they were blessed. However, after Balak's insistence and promises of wealth, Balaam finally agreed to go, although God warned him that he would only say what God ordered. On his way, Balaam had a supernatural encounter with the angel of the Lord, who reiterated the importance of obeying God. When Balaam arrived in Moab, he attempted to curse Israel 3 times, but each time, God transformed his curses into blessings. Despite Balak's efforts to change the places of sacrifice and offer more offerings, Balaam could not pronounce any curse against Israel. This event underscores God's divine protection over Israel and the futility of human efforts to counter God's plans. Another significant event is the account of King Eglon and Judge Ehud, narrated in Judges chapter 3, verses 12 to 30. Because the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, God allowed Eglon, king of Moab, to subjugate them. Eglon ruled Israel for 18 years, causing great suffering to the people. God raised up Ehud, a left-handed judge from the tribe of Benjamin, to deliver Israel. Ehud brought a tribute to Eglon, and using his left hand, he concealed a dagger on his right thigh. After delivering the tribute, he requested a private audience with Eglon, claiming to have a secret message from God. Once alone, Ehud drew the dagger and killed Eglon, escaping before being discovered. Ehud then led the Israelites in an offensive against the Moabites, achieving a great victory and freeing Israel from Moabite oppression. These accounts not only highlight the conflicts between Moab and Israel, but also how God intervened to protect and guide his people, ensuring the fulfillment of his divine purposes. The Moabites in the time of David. The relationship between David and the Moabites is an interesting chapter in biblical history, marked by a complex interplay of alliances, conflicts, and family connections that illustrate the richness and depth of interactions between these two peoples. In his youth, David had a relationship of refugee with the Moabites. While fleeing from King Saul, David sought a safe place for his parents and decided to send them to Moab, as recounted in 1 Samuel chapter 22, verses 3 to 4. This decision was likely due to David's family connection to the Moabites through his great-grandmother Ruth, who was a Moabite. By entrusting his parents to the king of Moab, David showed a level of trust and respect toward the Moabites, suggesting that at that time, relations were peaceful and mutually beneficial. However, this relationship changed drastically when David became king. In 2 Samuel chapter 8 verse 2, it is recorded how David defeated the Moabites and subdued them, imposing a tribute. This change in relationship could be interpreted as a political and military necessity to consolidate his kingdom and secure Israel's borders, which required subjugating neighboring nations, including Moab. This action reflects the changing realities of alliances and conflicts in the region. A crucial aspect of the relationship between David and the Moabites is the figure of Ruth the Moabite. Ruth's story is told in the book that bears her name and is one of the most moving stories in the Bible. Ruth, a Moabite woman, married an Israelite, and after her husband's death, she decided to follow her mother-in-law Naomi back to Bethlehem, adopting Israel's faith and people as her own. Her famous declaration, "Your people will be my people, and your God my God," Ruth chapter 1, verse 16, symbolizes her total conversion and loyalty. Ruth's devotion and her eventual marriage to Boaz, a relative of Naomi, not only integrated her into the Israelite community, but also made her an ancestor of King David, and by extension of the Messiah, Jesus. This shows how, despite the conflicts and cultural differences, personal ties and shared faith could unite Israelites and Moabites in a meaningful way. The relationship between David and the Moabites, with the inclusion of Ruth's figure, underscores the complexity of human and divine interactions in the biblical narrative, highlighting themes of trust, betrayal, and redemption that are fundamental to Israel's story. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of the Moabites. I hope you found this content as fascinating as I did. If you are passionate about biblical mysteries, you can't miss our video on Leviathan, the mysterious sound of the ocean that defies all explanation. Discover what's behind this astonishing phenomenon and how it connects to the oldest accounts. Click now and keep exploring the Bible's hidden enigmas.